Kaboom, and welcome to the Signature Spell Bomb. Thanks for stopping by. This is Chad, and I just wanted to welcome you to our Father's Day special episode of the Oath Breakdown. All of the decks on this channel are built for the Oathbreaker format. If you want to know more about Oathbreaker, please check out the link in the description, or you can visit the amazing community on Reddit for more information, including deck help, events, rules, and bans. On today's episode of the Oath Breakdown, we will be looking at a $125.20 deck tech, by far the most expensive deck tech we've done so far. The cost of this deck will include shipping, the cost of our Planeswalker, and the basic lands for the deck. Decks on this channel are built to be affordable, fun, and interactive so that you can have fun with your casual play group. This is in order to help new players join the format. Today's deck is focused on an approximate power level of 6 on the table. Just a quick reminder, if you're interested in this deck tech or any of the cards in this video, you can order your cards from my friends at Mythic Games Colorado. I'll put a link to their stuff in the description. On the Oath Breakdown, we like to break a deck down and build it back up so you can see how the deck works and how it was designed. Now let's get into it. Today's Oathbreaker deck is Artificial Papa. It's a Karn the Great Creator deck with Scour from Existence as our signature spell. 2 weeks ago, I received a dare from King of Kingdoms, he's a user here on YouTube, who said, "I love this vid. Can you describe the greatest moment in your life in your next video? Oh, and happy dare day." At the time, I responded to King of Kingdoms that I would be happy to do that if he'd be willing to wait for my Father's Day special. An interesting fact about me is that I am adopted and that my parents are wonderful. I hit the jackpot lottery for parents who could have got me. They got me, so c'est la vie. So the greatest moment of my life so far was the day I was lovingly adopted. This deck tech is dedicated to my father as part of Father's Day. The artificial father for our artifact deck is Karn the Great Creator. We are actually playing a budget deck. I'm going to run through Karn real quick. He costs 4 mana. He's a legendary Planeswalker Karn. He has 5 loyalty when he enters play. Activated abilities of artifacts your opponents control can't be activated. +1 until end of turn. Up to 1 target non-creature artifact becomes an artifact creature, with power and toughness each equal to its converted mana cost. And his -2 is you may choose an artifact card you own from outside the game or in exile, reveal that card, and put it into your hand. We're actually playing Karn for a couple reasons. His static ability will help us slow down some of our opponent's decks. His +1 will allow us to make some bonus creatures to attack or block with. And his -2 is pretty much unusable to us altogether since there aren't sideboards, wish boards removed from play zones in the Oathbreaker format. Our signature spell for the deck is Scour from Existence. It costs 7 mana. It's an instant and allows us to exile any permanent. We're running Scour from Existence because we have very few colorless spell options we can actually play. They just haven't made a lot of colorless instants and sorceries. In our color of colorless, it's actually fairly cheap removal. We don't get good removal spells for less than 7 mana. It can hit any permanent and deal with any problem we might have. And also, if Daddy Karn brought you into this world, you best believe he can take you out of it. Now that we know what cards are in our command zone, what's our game plan? We are going to actually be assembling a construct tribal army. And we're going to play some 1/1 power, we're going to play some 1/1 counters and power up strategies and then wreak havoc. Our goal is to build up an army, cause trouble for our opponents, and overwhelm them. Now on to our breakdown. In this first section, we're going to look through our ramp package. Growing up, my folks adopted every child that came through the door and treated all my friends like their own, so we're going to start with My Sons A Dork. For 2 mana, we're running Hedron, Crawler, and Mannequin. They're mostly in here just as little blockers that we can tap for colorless mana. We also have Millikin that does the same for 2 mana, but we have to mill a card in order to get his mana advantage. For 3 mana, we have Foundry Inspector. It's a 3/2 construct and makes our artifact spells cost 1 less to play. We're running another Planeswalker in Ugin the Ineffable for 6 mana. He makes our colorless spells cost 2 less to cast. We can +1 him to take a card from our library and place it face down, and then we create a 2/2 colorless spirit creature token. When that token dies, we get to put that card into our hand. So this is kind of just slower draw. And for -3, we can destroy target permanent that is 1 or more colors. Semi-Balance Anvil costs 3 mana. When it comes into play, we can imprint a card on it. We take a card from our hand and exile it underneath. Any spells that share a card type with it cost 2 less to cast. We're going to put an artifact under this most of the time, and in that way, we can make almost every card in our deck more affordable to play. Now, this deck, because we're reducing the mana cost of things so low, and we're often able to tap our creatures to produce some mana, we're going to actually run through our hand pretty quick. So in order to stay in the game, we're going to supplement our hand and filter out some junk in our next section, Refurbished. My dad spent most of his life building and refurbishing machines. He's worked in parts warehouses, so that's why I thought to do this. Ruined Servitor costs 2 colorless mana. It's a 2/2 creature. When it dies, each player draws a card. Deal Broker costs 3 mana. It's a 2/3. We're going to ignore most of its text because it only works if you're drafting it, but the bottom line reads, tap, draw a card, and then discard a card. Mindless Automaton costs 4 mana. It's a 0/0 construct creature that comes into play with 2 1/1 counters on it. If we pay 1 and discard a card, we can put a 1/1 counter on it. If we can remove 2 1/1 counters from it, we can draw a card. We are running some 1/1 counter strategies that I'll go over later in the deck tech. Treasure Keeper for 4 mana is a 3/3 construct. When it dies, we reveal cards from top of our library and to reveal a non-land card with converted mana cost 3 or less. We may cast that card without paying its mana cost and put all the reveal cards not cast this way onto the bottom of our library in a random order. This might not seem like card advantage, but in a later section I'll explain how we can kind of use this to our benefit. Scrapyard Recombiner costs 3. It's a modular artifact, which means it comes into play with 2 1/1 counters on it. We can tap and sacrifice an artifact and search our library for a construct card, reveal it and put it into our hand, and then shuffle our library. All of the creatures in our deck are constructs, so this is going to help us look for key pieces. The only thing better than draw is tutoring, and that's what this Recombiner can do for us. In our next section, we're going to get into the creatures that will power up our artifacts and the spells that will in steel plating. Arcbound Worker costs 1 colorless mana, and it's a modular creature. It comes into play with a 1/1 counter on it. When it dies, and this is true of all our modular creatures, we can move those 1/1 counters onto another artifact creature in play. So we'll be able to make use of that. Spin Crusher costs 2. It's a 0/2 artifact creature. Whenever it blocks, we put a 1/1 counter on it. We can remove a 1/1 counter from it and it'll become unblockable for a turn. So this is a fun place to put our power and our 1/1 counters. Any unblockable creature helps us guarantee we can get some damage through. There's actually going to be quite a few ways in the deck tech that help us get our damage through, but I wasn't able to put those cards into one section because it just made more sense for them to be in the section with certain cards. Steel Overseer costs 2 colorless. He's an artifact creature construct. He's a 1/1. If we tap him, we put a 1/1 counter on each artifact creature we control. This is one of those things you tutor for. Chief of the Foundry costs 3. He's a 2/3 artifact construct, and he just gives all the artifact creatures we control +1/+1. So any of the artifacts we remove 1/1 counters from in order to do things, he makes sure they don't instantly die. Shambling Suit for 3 mana is a star power and 3 defense artifact creature whose power is equal to the number of artifacts or enchantments we control. We are pretty much running everything is artifacts except for 2 or 3 cards. I think Ugin and a spell later in the deck tech are the only 2. Crackle Down Construct for 4 is a 2/2 artifact creature. Whenever we activate the ability of an artifact creature that is a mana ability, it gets +1/+1 till end of turn. He can also become a fun big beater. And finally, for cards that can make our artifact creatures big, we have Stoneforge Masterwork. For 1 colorless, it's an artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each other creature we control that shares a creature type with it, and it equips for 2. And like I said earlier, almost all of our creatures are constructs, so this can sometimes make one creature just a terrifying beater. As you may have noticed, Some of the cards through our deck text so far are only valuable once they die or leave play. So I'm going to go through how we actually get them in our graveyard in our next section to the bin. We're going to run Grafted War Gear. It costs 3 mana. It makes the equipped creature +3/+2, but then whenever Grafted War Gear becomes unattached from that creature, we can sack it, and it equips for 0. There's going to be a couple artifacts that pretty much do the same thing. We want to use this on our Ugin creatures we can create, so we can draw those cards faster, and some of the other cards. Piston Sledge does the same thing, but it'll auto-equip to a creature when it comes into play. It gives it +3/+1 instead of +3/+2. And we can move it around by sacrificing artifacts. And Demon Male Halbrook costs 4. It gives the equipped creature +4/+2, and equip by sacrificing a creature, just like the War Gear. Now let's get into more of our value in our next section, back from the bin. Salvager of Ruin costs 3. He's a 2/1. We can sacrifice him and choose target permanent in our graveyard that was put there from the battlefield this turn and return it to our hand. This is going to be good for anything we filter to draw or any creature we lose that we need back as part of our combo. And it's something that's not usually targeted, so it's fairly useful. Scrap Trawler costs 3 colorless. It's a 3/2 construct. This one requires a little bit more explanation. Whenever it or another creature we control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, we can return another artifact card from our graveyard with a lesser converted mana cost. So it's kind of best to think about this. We just talked about Salvager of Ruin. So let's say it's in play. I sack it. I can return any artifact from my graveyard to my hand. I could also, once it hits the graveyard, if Scrap Trawler is in play, return any artifact from the graveyard from my hand that costs 2 or less. So I can get double value from it. Knowing that, let's look at Metalwork Colossus. Metalwork Colossus is a 10/10 construct that costs 11 colorless mana. We can reduce it by artifacts that of course reduce cost, but also every non-creature artifact reduces his cost. So sometimes you can play him for free. He reads, sacrifice 2 artifacts, return him from your graveyard to your hand. So he's good because it gives us some sack outlets, like the equipment I went through in the previous section. He returns to our hand, and he can get any card in our graveyard back to our hand when Scrap Trawler's in play that costs 11 mana or less. So we can use him to kind of utilize some loops or cycles in order to replay some creatures. So any of our modular creatures, if they die, we put their 1/1 counters on somebody, we can then use a Scrap Trawler ability to kill a creature, have that creature going to the graveyard, trigger off Scrap Trawler, get the modular creature back to our hand, play it again, and watch, rinse, and repeat. And with our mana reducers, sometimes we can do all of this for free or very, very cheap. Now let's take a quick look at how we can deal with our opponent's plans with our machinations. Serrated Beskelion costs 3. It's a 2/2 creature. If we tap it and put a -1/-1 counter on it, we can put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. Weakening our opponent's creatures is always good. Since we're running a little bit of a +1/+1 counter strategy, we can actually do this quite a few times before it dies. And I'll take any removal that's reusable. Pierce Strider costs 4. It's a 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, we have target opponent lose 3 life. Going off of our Scrap Trawler and our stuff from in the earlier section, being able to cycle this over and over can do our opponents a lot of damage. Scuttling Doom Engine does this in a different way. It's a 6/6 creature. It can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less, and when it dies, we deal 6 damage, target opponent or planeswalker, dealing with our opponent's Oathbreakers. Warping Whale costs 1 and a colorless mana. It is an instant. We can choose one of the following modes. Exile target creature with power or toughness 1 or less. Counter target sorcery spell, or put a 1/1 colorless Eldrazi Scion creature token onto the battlefield, and it'll have sacrifice this creature, add 1 mana of any color. None of these modes are terrible, it's just doesn't make for a great signature spell in this particular deck. It could be good in an Ugin deck, because sometimes we could cast it for so cheap for so long that these modes become very useful. Liquid Metal Coating costs 2 colorless. It's an artifact, and it has tap target permanent becomes an artifact in addition to its other types till end of turn. This card is actually really important to helping to shut down our opponent's plans. What we can do is tap it, make one of their lands or their planeswalker or something with an activated ability preferably into an artifact. And then what will happen is Karn's static ability will trigger and say you cannot activate those abilities of an artifact if it's controlled by an opponent. So we can tap liquid metal coating to essentially just shut down oppressive or problematic permanents while we're playing against our opponents. Try saying that 5 times fast. Some of our cards and creatures want to trigger more than once in a particular turn cycle, so let's figure out how we're going to do that in our next section, Turn the Key. Traxos, Scourge of Krog, costs 4. He's a 7/7 construct with trample. He enters the battlefield tapped and doesn't untap during our untap step. But whenever we cast a historic spell, we get to untap him. Our deck is almost entirely artifacts or, legendary planeswalkers, so untapping him is very easy. So he's got a built-in tap-untap. Voltaic Construct, costs 4 colorless. It's a 2/2 artifact golem. You can pay 2 colorless mana and untap target artifact creature. This is just really good with most of our artifacts in the deck. It's very, very good once we use this Karn's +1 ability to turn our liquid metal coating into a 2/2 creature. And then what we can do is we can tap it multiple times in a turn cycle to lock down permanents across multiple opponents. Manifold Key costs 1 colorless. It's an artifact. We can pay 1 and tap it to untap another target artifact. Or we can pay 3 and tap it, and target creature is unblockable this turn. It's just a good way for us to get our damage through. Traxos definitely wants to get through. We're definitely going to pump up our creatures. This helps us just get around blockers and helps us with armies that could otherwise just chump us out. We have a couple cards that don't really specifically fit into one of the previous sections, but they do help with our overall plan, so I call this section the Outcasts, which is what my father dealt with while I was growing up. Executioner's Hood costs 2 mana. It says equipped creature has Intimidate, and it equips for 2. The beauty of Executioner's Hood is none of our creatures have color, so essentially makes it so our opponents can only block our creatures. Actually, it makes it so our opponents can't block our creatures at all, because colorless isn't a color. So I think they can still be blocked by artifact creatures. If I'm wrong, please correct me in the comments and below, but this is just a very useful spell in our deck. Mirror Battlesphere costs 7. It's a 4/7 mirror construct. When it enters the battlefield, we create 4 1/1 colorless mirror creature tokens. This is a great way to get some fast incidental blockers. This is also a really great card to tutor for. Whenever the battlesphere attacks, we may tap X untap mirror creature tokens. If we do, it gets +X/+O till end of turn and deals X damage to target player or planeswalker it's attacking. That X damage is wonderful. It can help us deal with some problematic permanents since it's not blockable or stopped. If we can, in a turn cycle, play Mirror Battlesphere a couple of times, we can end up with a pretty massive little army of mirrors and make this terrifying. So this is just a different way we can run the deck in order to get to our endgame. So now that we've gone through all the cards in the deck, let's take a gander at what makes the deck run in the mana base. So we're going to run Darksteel Citadel. It's an indestructible artifact land that taps for colorless. Phyrexia's Core taps for colorless, and we can pay 1 and tap and sacrifice an artifact to gain 1 life. This is just an extra sack outlet to help us sack the creatures or things we need to in order to recur our value. Rogue's Passage. We can tap it for a colorless, or we can pay 4 and tap it to make target creature unblockable this turn. Again, this has a similar effect to the Manifold Key. We do want effects like this to make sure we can get our damage through. And we're running Tomb of the Spirit Dragon. We can tap it for a colorless, or we can pay 2 and tap it and gain 1 life for each colorless creature we control, which is every creature in the deck. And finally, we're running 20 basic wastes. Now that we have looked at all the cards in the deck, let's do a quick price check. Our deck prices are based on the best available prices on TCG Player at the time of recording, including the cost of shipping, and in this special case, we're going to include the cost of basic lands since wastes are sometimes a little hard to come by. The average deck cost for a Karn the Great Creator deck on Oathbreaker.edhrec.com is $417.06. Our deck is going to be much lower at $125.20. If you want to see a breakdown of the deck costs, there's a link posted in the description. This deck was built with a budget in mind, even though it was quite a bit larger of a budget in order to get the deck built. But if you do have the resources and you want to invest in it, here are some betterments and improvements you might want to consider. Now, generally when I'm choosing betterments and improvements for a deck, I try to keep them under $10 for the cards. Karn's Bastion can go into the deck. You tap it to add a colorless. You can pay 4 and tap it to proliferate. This is just good with our 1/1 counter strategies, especially for the things that want to remove 1/1 counters in order to gain value. It doesn't really pair well with our Oathbreaker, but it does do a decent job working with Ugin. We're going to take out Darksteel Citadel for it. We suggest adding a Buried Ruin. It's a land that taps for colorless, and if we pay 2 and sacrifice it, we can return target artifact from our graveyard to our hand. Just a great way to get back key pieces and keep the deck running. We're going to suggest you take out 1 waste. Since they operate the same, there's very little cost to make that change. We suggest you add an Inventor's Fair. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 3 or more artifacts, you gain 1 life. Incidental life gain is always good in Oathbreaker because we're playing with a 20 life format. It's far more useful than it is in EDH. You can tap for a colorless mana, and if you pay 4 and tap and sacrifice, you can search your library for an artifact card, reveal it, and put it in your hand, and then shuffle your library. Activates this ability only if you control 3 or more artifacts. Again, the only thing better than card draw is tutoring. And we're going to remove a waste for that as well. Adaptive Automaton for 3 mana is an artifact construct. When it enters the battlefield, we choose a creature type. It is the chosen type in addition to its other types, and other creatures we control get +1/+1 until end of turn. It's another good way to pump up our army. To add this, we're going to take out the Serrated Basilion. We suggest, if you can, add a Kildatha Forge Master. He costs 5. You can tap him and sacrifice 3 artifacts to search your library for an artifact card and put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle your library. And this is good for just surprising the opponent by putting something directly into play. In order to add him, we're going to suggest you take out Deal Broker. Just getting to search something and put it directly into play is always better than a looting effect. We do suggest that you add Paradox Engine. It costs 5. Whenever you cast a spell, you can untap all the non-land permanents you control. This is just really good in the deck because it will allow us multiple uses of our artifacts at no cost. And we suggest you remove Voltaic Construct in order to add it. And then finally, we suggest you change out the signature spell, Scour from Existence, for All is Dust. It's just the same cost, and it's going to make all our opponents sacrifice their colored permanents and have no effect on us. These one-sided board wipes can really make a deck work well, especially when we just need to get our damage through. Here at the Signature Spell Bomb, we do want to be your source for Oathbreaker content, and you can help us out by telling us what we can do to better provide content for the Oathbreaker community. Please tell us what you like or hate about today's deck tech, and what cards you think we may have overlooked or missed. There's so many cards in Magic, I'm certain I missed something. It also helps us if you remember to like, share, and subscribe, and turn on notifications so you know when the next Oath Breakdown video goes live. We do have merchandise. If you want to show your signature Spellbomb pride, please check out our new Run with the Booster Pack merchandise based on the Arlene Core deck tech that is on the channel. I'm going to keep doing that bit because it just makes me smile. Please see the link in the description for our merch. If you want hints about future content on the channel or you want to connect with us, please check out our social media thingies listed here. If you want to support the channel directly, please consider supporting us at patreon.com/signaturesspellbomb or paypal.me/signaturesspellbomb. Again, a huge thank you to you guys for hanging out with me. I can't do it without you, and I wouldn't. Thanks again, and I'm off to Oathbreak another deck.